Charlie Dore, welcome back to Camden Town Radio.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
And it's great to have you on the show again.
Yes, it's been a while, hasn't it?
Yes, I think it was shortly before lockdown when we last caught up. So yeah, I think we're overdue a catch-up.
Absolutely, yes. That's all we've talked about, isn't it, for everyone, for about the last couple of years. So it's nice to be able to talk about something other than not being able to do gigs.
That's right, absolutely. And we notice you have a lot of shows coming up booked for this year.
Yes, there's a few. We're gradually putting them back in, and some of them are gigs that were supposed to happen 2 years ago.
Okay, yeah.
So we're picking those up. So there's quite a variety. And what we are doing this year, which we haven't done before, is in November I made my first ever Christmas EP.
Okay.
I'd never done that before. I'd always sort of fought very shy of the Christmas thing.
Yes.
Danger. It could be very dangerous. But anyway, I did eventually make a little EP with three songs on it.
Yeah.
And promptly all the gigs we had booked to promote it got cancelled.
Oh, yes.
Because of postponed, I should say. Postponed.
Yes.
Because of there was a sudden surge in infections and things. So we never got to play it. So we decided, in this line of gigs, that we would include it in our set. There's these three songs. And we just thought it would be fun because they're fun to play. And they're not particularly, traditional Christmas songs anyway.
Yeah.
So in the middle of our set, we just pop in these three songs. And so that's the first time I've done that.
Oh, right. That'll be interesting. And because I think, was it the case that just before lockdown you were working on your latest album at that time?
Yes, that's right. Yes, Like Animals.
Yeah.
Everything was scheduled to coincide with the release, which was June 2020.
Yes.
And all the gigs were the launch gig was at King's Place. And that had been booked, months and months and months ahead. And all the rest of the tour was around that.
Yes.
And then lo and behold, like a wonderful magic spell, there it wasn't. And the album was there. We'd finished that. We'd made that. That was all ready to go. And there was a moment when we thought, shall we do this? Shall we still release it? Should we wait? And I thought, it's still there. A lot of people are going to listen to it who wouldn't come to a gig, there are followers all over the country, and they're certainly not going to come to, a London gig or whatever. So, we'll put it out anyway. So we did.
Now, I must just ask you a bit about the theme. I mean, I'm assuming that it's based around animals and things of that nature?
Well, it's connecting theme.
Yeah. Is
really how like animals we are still.
Okay.
So it isn't specifically about animals, but about how in lots of ways we are absolutely animal-like.
Yes.
When we're under threat, or when we love something, or when we feel power or lack of power.
Yes.
We become animals again, and I just thought it was a very interesting and fertile area.
Yes. Yes, it makes sense. I seem to remember you've spoken about animals before, and you're quite a keen pet lover. Would that be correct?
Well, yes, we were sort of late dog owners. We didn't get our first dog until the early 2000s.
Oh, right. Okay.
And we had, I didn't even know, I didn't even really want a dog initially, but my partner Tom was always campaigning for a dog.
Right.
We always had cats.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
But finally he sort of just nagged me into it, and we got our first dog. And of course, as all dog lovers will know, or at least I hope they feel like this, gradually they do sort of inveigle their way into your heart.
Yes, well, they become part of the family, really.
Well, they are, yes, they are.
It's interesting because they're very different, dogs to cats. They're very different in the way that they act. I mean, cats are kind of a free spirit, aren't they? They come and go when they want, whereas dogs are more sort of regimented with walks every day or whatever. So
yes, we had both at the same time. Actually, I mean, for when we had a couple of brothers, Archie and Wilbur, who were cats, and we'd had them for years before we got Woody, our first dog, and I mean they were horrified, and they didn't speak to us for about 6 months, and we had to actually, we had to cut a cat flap, a new cat flap, out of my music room window because they wouldn't come into the sitting room, which is where their original one was.
Yes.
Because that's where Woody was, and they were, they were very, very cross at having this puppy, and I couldn't believe that it would ever be okay. Oh. And people said, "Don't worry, it'll happen at some point. They'll be okay.
They'll get used to it." Yes.
They did in the end, but honestly, it was. I kept thinking, oh, what have we done? But yes. Anyway, so back to the album. The album is sort of. I mean, every song isn't sort of religiously. I see the connection there. Yeah. But it always helps me anyway to have a thread.
Yeah.
And I mean, for instance, there's a song called "Collateral" on it, which is about power.
Yes.
And how corrupting it can be.
Yeah.
That was interesting to write, and research as well. It led me down some routes that I wouldn't otherwise perhaps have gone down. Reading about parts of the brain.
Yeah.
That make us behave in a certain way.
Oh, right.
And if you get your copy of the album, there's a picture of the amygdala, which is part of the brain, prominently when you open the album, and people are thinking, "What the? Why are you doing this?" It's because it's where it's the seat of a lot of emotions and makes us behave in certain ways. It's a tiny little thing like a walnut.
Oh, yes.
Anyway, there's lots of aspects of discovery about behaviour.
Yes.
Very big range, and it's intentionally far-ranging because when you're writing a song, it's nice to be able to. It's good in some ways to have a kind of restriction and a framework.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I always think, well, it's my album. I can break my own rules if I want to.
Yes. I think it's certainly a theme that people will be very interested in at the moment, because I think animals and pets in particular have been a very important part during lockdown with helping people get through the
Yes, it's
many
a very
months.
basic relationship, isn't it? It's quite an innocent relationship, isn't it? I.e., it's unconditional.
That's right. Yeah.
Which is nice, but it's certainly in terms of mental health and how people react to isolation.
Yeah.
And stress. Animals can be extraordinarily important. That's and right. Healing, actually.
Yeah.
But I mean, I didn't even. Of course, when that album was written, none of the whole. It was finished before any of this whole pandemic thing had happened. So, that there isn't a reference to that. I'm sure there must have been thousands of songs written about the results of being isolated.
Perhaps you can do a part 2 or a follow-up album that's...
I'd have to join the side of the mountain there, wouldn't I? I think.
You've lots of gigs coming up, which is great, and there's a good gig in particular coming up this Tuesday in Camden Town at Green Note.
Yes, that's right. This is in celebration of International Women's Day.
Yeah.
This is organised by Michele Stodart, who's become a good friend, and I first really met her through the Green Note.
Yeah.
Through Imi and Risa at the Green Note, and we were introduced, and they had these nights that were run by Michele and her brother Romeo.
Oh yeah.
Where they would invite friends and colleagues to play. It was a very sort of almost like a club, really.
Yes, yes.
And I expect you've probably been to some of those. But anyway, it was a great thing that they used to do now and again. And I met Michele there. And funnily enough, in the last International Women's Day that she organised, or she might have done one in the middle, I'm not sure. But anyway,
yes.
Last one I was concerned with was in 2019. And I worked with her then, and she put that together. She's a very good curator
yes.
of music and musicians. She just got this real nose for, finding interesting people,
yes.
And putting them together. And so that's what she's done with this. There's Michele, and there's 3 others, and they're all very different.
Yes, we've got the lineup here, actually. We've got Danny Nichols, Zoe
yes.
Conez, Ravenan Husbanders, Michele Stodart herself,
yes.
and yourself.
Yes, that's right. They're all very, very different from each other. They're all really interesting and inventive and all really good players and singers. But I didn't know them before, or I didn't know their music.
Right.
Their names were familiar, but I didn't really know their music before. Yes. But I've since been exploring it since we're going to be working together.
Yes.
And very impressed. I mean, I always I know that anything Michele is involved in will be interesting and unusual. And the Green Note is a great supporter of fresh, new stuff.
Yes, that's right.
And I mean, I was saying fresh and new. I mean, these all these performers have quite impressive careers and have been around.
Yeah.
Doing interesting stuff. But it's going to be lovely to be part of that.
Yes, it should be a very good evening, and I think there's tickets still available if our listeners are interested to go to that evening on Tuesday.
Yes, and it'll also be a nice occasion for me to do a song that I wrote with Michele.
Ah, right. Okay.
We wrote a song called 100 Miles of Nothing.
Yeah.
That's on the Like Animals album.
Ah, right. So you can.
And
is it a duet?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Yes, and we're going to do that. And the only other time we've done it actually live in the same room in front of an audience was at the launch.
Oh, okay.
Which was the delayed launch,
yes.
which was last June at King's Place.
Good.
Yes.
No, it looks a very good lineup. Are they all quite different styles then? The artists that are on, or?
Yes, they're all they're very different from each other. Very different voices, very different approaches.
Right.
There's a great variety there, which is lovely. We all collaborate. There's points where we all collaborate.
Ah, okay.
I think the first of it is going to be sort of song swapping, basically.
Right.
Each singing their own song and then talking a little bit about it. People are going to talk about the process of writing the song.
Yes.
And the thoughts behind it. I mean, the Green Note is such a great space for that because it's very intimate. It's really nice to sit in that room and hear people talk about their music and chat to each other. It's just it's a relaxing atmosphere to be in.
Yes, it's always a very nice atmosphere in the Green Note. Certainly, I found that.
Yeah, it's lovely. The sound is always excellent. The sound engineering is always wonderful, and somehow, just as soon as the lights go down, it's just a really nice atmosphere. Somehow it just sort of works, and it's just nice to be in there. Yeah.
And I always get the impression the artists feel very comfortable performing there. They always seem to enjoy, very much being on stage there.
Yes. I've performed there in several different configurations. I've been there as a duo with my pal Julian Lippman, who I work with a lot.
Oh, yeah.
I've been there with him. I've been there years ago as a trio. This was before they'd made the stage a bit bigger. The stage used to be at least a couple of feet smaller.
Oh, right.
God knows how we all fitted on there. We just, but it's a bit bigger than it was,
yes.
And somehow people managed to pile on there. There's masses of people getting on the stage now, double basses and things, and pianos, and God knows what. So, but it all works really well, and it's yes, it just feels relaxed and more natural than a lot of other venues,
yes.
And they do attract a really nice, thoughtful, listening audience.
Yes,
people really listen there.
Yes, you're right. People, it's one of the venues where you don't usually get talking when the music's on.
No, that's right.
Yeah.
You tend not to get that, and also,
Yes.
but another thing is that people seem to feel relaxed enough to react.
Yes.
I mean, people will laugh. Obviously, not when you don't want them to, but you know what I mean. If there's some humour to be found in something,
that's right.
they feel relaxed enough to laugh or applaud or whatever, which is always welcome.
You played in Liverpool back in February, and it's a question in connection with Liverpool. We read that George Harrison once covered one of your songs. Is that correct?
Yes, he did. It was a song called "Fear of Flying."
Ah, okay. Yes.
Which was on my very first album, and he heard that. We had a mutual friend, Eric Idle.
Yes.
Who was one of the Python
That's
team.
right, yes.
And George and Eric were huge friends. They were real close buddies.
Yes.
And Eric is very musical anyway. He's a really good player himself. Yes. And songwriter actually. And George had a great sense of humour. And in fact, he financed one of the Python films. He raised the money for it.
Yes.
Anyway, he rescued one of their films, and
yes.
I think he actually mortgaged his house or something to raise some money. So there's love for you, Anyway, they were great friends, and I'd known Eric for years and years and years, and we used to get together and just hang out and play music sometimes. And through that, he knew my song. Fear of Flying, and he played it to George, and George liked it, and unbeknownst to me, he recorded it.
I believe there's a demo knocking around somewhere.
Yes, there's a demo, and it was, it's in Olivia's private collection. It's not released. It was she briefly played about a minute of it or something, maybe 1.5 minutes on the radio.
Oh, right. Okay.
On Jules Holland's show, his radio show.
Yes.
And that's the only public exposure it's had.
Yes.
Because she sort of wants to keep it that way. I think. She feels quite kind of. It's only a demo, it's George, and so it's a good demo.
Yes,
of course.
Oh yes, it'll be. We were reading that you may have heard him play it at his house. Was that? Is it?
I did, yes. I heard him play. That's the first time I knew he knew it.
Oh right.
I knew Eric had given him a copy of the single, and George had a jukebox in the kitchen.
Oh gosh.
And that Fear of Flying, the single, the little, tiny little vinyl single.
Oh right, so I used to listen to it in his kitchen first. That's quite.
yeah, and it's a fairly straightforward song, and he learnt it, and I just heard him play it. He just played it.
All right, when you were there.
Which was extraordinary for me, and something, if you'd said to me when I was, 9 years old. One of the Beatles you're going to be sitting across the table from him and he's going to play your song.
Yes, it must have been.
I would have gone.
Have you met the other Beatles?
Yes, I've met Paul a couple of times.
Okay, yes. Was it with Linda when he was?
Yes.
Right, okay.
Yes. I had a friend who played in his band in Wings, and that's how I met him.
Okay.
2 or 3 times, and obviously that was quite. Paul was the one when I was a very little girl. That Paul was the one I wanted to marry.
Right.
No, he was very nice, and I've said this before actually when people have asked about which Beatles and what they were like and all that. Is that one thing certainly then was that he seemed to remember everyone's name really well.
Oh, right.
Which is immensely flattering.
Yes.
If you've only met somebody and you can imagine how many people, they meet.
Yes.
How many people anyone famous meets, and obviously, you remember them because they're famous.
Yes.
But that somebody like him can go, oh, hi, Charlie.
Oh, right.
Think,
Oh, that was good.
My God, he remembers me. But then he just has a knack. Well, he did anyway. I don't know what he's like these days, but it was very charming and flattering, and we sat and had a conversation about sheep farming, actually.
Oh. Well, he's lived quite remotely, hasn't he, on farms and things?
Yes,
over the
that's
years,
right.
and,
yes, so that was very interesting, and I never met John.
No, when he was.
Sadly, but
Ringo.
I've kind of in passing, but not really. Not really.
He's still going strong. I mean, he's still active.
He still does gigs.
That's right. He's still
he's
in his 80s, but he's still active and recording and doing concerts, and he puts it down to his lifestyle.
He's a terrific drummer. I think he's a fantastic drummer. He was certainly a fantastic drummer for the Beatles. He was so inventive.
That's right. Yes, no, he really did shape. When you hear drumming on the records, you know it's him. He's very distinctive and
very inventive and special. And I think he inspired a lot of people to kind of to experiment.
That's right.
Very, very special, and of course Zach, his son, is a drummer as well.
Yes.
Isn't he?
Yes, carrying on the family. Tradition.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, very special. I did you see the Get Back? It's a long film, but it's in sections, and I don't think anyone to eat it all in one go, but it's really special to see that kind of relationship between them.
Yes.
is quite extraordinary, and to know the background of it. And I know Paul has been very honest about it, because he was always so diplomatic about everything before, but I've heard interviews with him recently where he's been a lot more candid, which is interesting. But I mean, when you see the relationship between him and John, and you see how, however good George was, and he was good, immensely talented, there were only two people, I think there were only two people in that writing relationship, and that was Paul and John.
Yes.
They were like the married couple, and George was outside that, and that was just how it was, and you could see why he was frustrated.
Yes.
So there was so much under the surface there, and a lot of it on top of the surface as well, in plain sight. But it's a fantastic piece of work putting all that together. It's wonderful.
Anyway, bringing things forward to today, and your long-term partner Julian Littman, for your up-and-coming tour, will you be performing with Julian at these gigs, or is it a mixture of yourself?
Yes, I will. Yes, I'm going to be with Julian. Our next gig is actually the nearest to us. I mean, apart from London, it is in Oxford.
Oh, right, okay.
On March the 19th. In fact, 2 weeks tonight.
Oh, right, okay.
As we speak tonight.
Yeah.
Yes, March the 19th. We're at the Quaker Meeting House.
Ah, okay.
Which is I've not been there before, but it's a wood-panelled room.
Yes.
And wood is usually very nice for music.
Yes,
to be in a wooden room.
For acoustics, yes.
Yeah, it's really nice acoustics. So we're going to be there, and then we go down to Surrey. We go to Sutton to the Sound Lounge.
Oh,
that's on the 24th. On the 25th, we go all the way down to Somerset, to Churchingford, which I've never been before.
Oh.
And then we go to Cardiff and Wessex, and and back to Guildford again on the April the 10th.
Oh, yes.
So at the Electric Theatre. So actually there's a dozen. In fact, and there's more coming in as we speak. There's a dozen all told. And so we're going to be busy. I'm going to be, actually, for one of the gigs, I'm going to be with our double bass player, Gareth Davis.
Oh, yes.
And it's just going to be me and Gareth, because Jules is off on tour with Steel Ice Band. That's his other band.
Yes.
and they're off on tour in May.
Yeah.
And so I've toured actually with just me and Gareth before.
Okay.
And he's brilliant. He's not just a double bass player. He's a fantastic piano player.
Ah, right.
And also I forced him to play the ukulele, so he can play that now as well. And he sings, so it's a kind of musically. We do my songs from my various albums.
Yeah.
But the approach is slightly different. Everything's recognisable, as the song it originally was, but it's just slightly different emphasis and instrumentation, and it's really nice to do something slightly different.
Yes. It's nice to have nights off and come out to a show because it's so relaxing when you're not the performer.
Yes, yes.
Do you find the same? Maybe if you go to other shows, it's nice to some nights to.
I haven't been to enough in the last couple of years, that's for sure.
Yes, yeah.
And it's nearly always inspiring.
Yes.
And just to see, how other people relate to an audience.
Yes.
The pace of a show. Because it's very easy to get into a rut with how you perform. I think, and so it's interesting when somebody comes on and does something slightly different in. How they construct a show, everything, and I think it's certainly. I nearly always come away inspired by something I've seen, even if it's something where I think, I don't want to do that. I'm not going to do that.
Yes, no, you're right. You can see what things do work and that don't work sometimes.
So it's always entertaining and instructive as well, And yes, I'm looking forward to seeing some more. And also, with this show at the Green Note, because there's how many of us? 5 of us.
Yes.
I'm going to get a lot of time off listening to the others.
Yes,
so which would be great, inspiring.
Yes, and it's nice that everybody's not just on one after each other. You are actually going to be collaborating during the evening. That's quite a nice aspect.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, absolutely. In fact, right now, I should be learning. I'm supposed to be learning a couple of little bits to join in on 2 of Michele's songs.
Oh right.
That's my next task this evening.
Yes.
Because I've just got to make sure that my fingers know what my brain thinks.
Right.
It knows.
Yes, as the mechanics, I know if you don't play the guitar for a while, your fingers get out of.
Oh yes, I get in terrible trouble. And let alone that, one of the songs, words, for instance, new songs. I've got one song. I actually won't be doing it at the Green Note, but I will be doing it. I do it on the tour. One song has 12 verses.
Oh right.
And it's a story, and and that is I have to sing that virtually every day, otherwise I won't be able to do it. And that's an achievement. That's good for the brain. But yes, fingers. I try and do a deal with my fingers, before a show, and I go, "You're not going to let me down, are you?" and they go, "I don't know." You have to wait and see for that. And nerves, of course. Sometimes nerves make your fingers do strange things.
Yes, it can be. Well, I've found that sometimes the heat, if it's a cold venue, that can make things tricky as well. If the heating's not working properly.
Oh yeah,
especially on guitar.
Horrible. Yes, well, festivals and things.
Oh, yes.
I've done festivals in Arctic winds, and where your hands are, you just basically kind of stop working.
Yes, that can be challenging.
And I did one gig, I remember, where we supported Jules Holland.
Oh, yeah.
And it was, outdoors.
Yes.
Somewhere near Rugby, I think. Anyway, it was absolutely the wind. Although we were in kind of one of those enclosed box things, you know what I mean? The front was open to the audience, obviously. And it was so windy. As I stood there and played, my hair just blew right across my face. I couldn't see anything for the whole gig because every time I kind of brushed it out of the way, just the wind was blowing in the wrong direction. I never saw a thing throughout the whole gig. I have no idea what was going on. But anyway.
Yes. It was great to catch up with you again, Charlie. Good luck with the show on Tuesday and also with your upcoming tour.
Thank you.